The September evening air hung thick with humidity as Amara Washington guided her silver Honda Accord through the tree-lined streets of Bronzeville, Chicago's historic South Side neighborhood where Mahalia Jackson once sang and Gwendolyn Brooks once wrote poetry. She'd spent the afternoon at her sister's house in the suburbs, playing with her nieces, sharing stories over homemade peach cobbler, pretending for a few precious hours that she was just Amara, not Captain Washington, not the woman tasked with cleaning up one of Chicago's most troubled police districts, not the officer whose promotion had sparked angry whispers in precinct break rooms across the city. Her blazer hung in the back seat. She wore jeans and a Northwestern University sweatshirt, her natural hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. In 5 days, she would walk into District 18 for the first time as their new commanding officer. In 5 days, she would face a precinct culture poisoned by decades of old guard resistance to reform, where excessive force complaints disappeared into filing cabinets and body cameras mysteriously malfunctioned during controversial incidents. But tonight she was just a woman driving home, windows down, India. Airy playing softly on the radio. The red and blue lights exploded in her rearview mirror without warning. If you've ever been pulled over while black, you know that spike of adrenaline, that immediate calculation of survival. If you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their skin color, hit that subscribe button, because what happened next would expose the brutal reality of how some officers see citizens who look like Amara, even when those citizens wear the same badge. Amara's hands moved with practiced precision, executing the choreography that black parents teach their children as carefully as they teach them to tie their shoes. Both hands on the steering wheel, 10 and 2, visible, non-threatening. She pulled to the curb slowly, signaling well in advance, parking under a streetlight where everything would be visible. Her phone sat in the cup holder. She could reach it, should record this, but moving toward anything could be interpreted as reaching for a weapon. The patrol car's spotlight hit her rearview mirror, flooding her car with harsh white light. She couldn't see the officers approaching, could only hear boots on pavement, 2 sets, heavy and purposeful. Her heart hammered against her ribs. 23 years on the force, and she still felt this primal fear during traffic stops. Officer Derek Ward appeared at her driver's side window, his bulk blocking out the streetlight. At 6'2" and over 200 pounds, he filled the window frame like a wall. His partner, Officer Brian Cole, positioned himself at the passenger side, hand resting on his weapon. "License and registration," Ward barked. Not, "Good evening." Not, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Just a command, delivered with the casual contempt of someone addressing a subordinate species. "Of course, officer," Amara said, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "My license is in my purse on the passenger seat. My registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them slowly." Ward's eyes narrowed. "You got something to hide? Why you asking permission?" "Just want to make sure we're all safe," she said. She reached for her purse with movements so slow she might have been moving underwater, acutely aware that Cole's hand had tightened on his weapon. "This your car?" Ward asked, snatching her license before she'd fully extended it. He examined it with exaggerated scrutiny. Amara J. Washington, 41 years old. He said her age like it was evidence of something suspicious. "This address current?" "Yes, sir." "Sir?" Ward laughed, a harsh sound that held no humor. "Hear that, Cole? She called me sir, trying to be respectful. That's usually what guilty people do, overcompensate with politeness. You guilty of something, Amara?" The way he used her first name, stripping away the formality of Ms. Washington, reducing her to someone he could address with casual familiarity. It was a small violation, but violations added up. "I'm not guilty of anything," Amara said. "Can you tell me why you pulled me over?" "Broken taillight." Amara's jaw tightened. Her taillights worked perfectly. She'd had the car serviced 2 days ago. "Officer, I believe my taillights are functioning." "Are you arguing with me?" Ward's voice dropped to a dangerous register. I pulled you over for a broken taillight. Now you're arguing, which makes me wonder what else you're hiding. Step out of the vehicle. Officer, I don't think... I said step out of the vehicle. Now! Amara opened her door slowly. Cole moved closer to the passenger side, his body language screaming threat assessment. Ward positioned himself to block any escape route, his hand now openly resting on his weapon. Turn around. Face the car. Hands on the hood. Officer Ward, Amara said, reading his nameplate as she complied. I'm a police officer. I'm a captain with the Chicago Police Department. My badge and credentials are in my purse. Sure you are, Ward interrupted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. And I'm the superintendent. You people always claim to be someone important when you get pulled over. Lawyers, doctors, judges, cops. You'll say anything to avoid accountability. You people. The words hung in the humid air like poison gas. Cole laughed from his position by the passenger door. Had a guy last week claim he was an alderman. Turned out he had 3 outstanding warrants and a trunk full of stolen property. They all lie, man. Amara pressed her palms against the still warm hood of her Honda. Witnesses were gathering. She could see them in her peripheral vision. A man in a 3rd-floor apartment window had his phone out, recording. A woman had stopped her evening walk, standing on the sidewalk about 20 feet away. My credentials are real, Amara said, keeping her voice level. My badge number is 4738. I'm Captain Amara Washington. I'm scheduled to take command of District 18 in 5 days. If you'll just check my purse... Ward's hand clamped onto her shoulder like a vice, fingers digging through her sweatshirt into muscle with unnecessary force. Listen to me very carefully, he said, his mouth inches from her ear. I don't know what game you're playing, but impersonating a police officer is a felony. That's prison time. So you need to stop lying right now and tell me the truth. Whose car is this? Where'd you get it? You steal it? I didn't steal anything. Amara tried to turn her head. My registration is right there in the glove compartment. It has my name on it. Cole, check the registration, Ward ordered. Then to Amara. But I'm betting it's not your name. I'm betting this vehicle comes back stolen. You people think you can drive through decent neighborhoods in cars you can't afford and nobody's gonna notice. We notice. Decent neighborhoods. The phrase landed like a slap. Bronzeville, historically black, culturally rich, where her grandmother had lived for 60 years. Ward had just labeled it decent, implying that Amara was the indecent element that didn't belong. Cole returned from checking the registration, his young face twisted with confusion. Registration matches her name and the VIN. Title's clean. Car's not stolen. Ward's grip on Amara's shoulder tightened painfully. Then check for warrants. Run her license. I guarantee she's got something. Minutes crawled by. Amara remained bent over her car hood, arms spread, a position designed to maximize physical vulnerability and psychological submission. Her shoulders began to ache. Sweat trickled down her back. The crowd of witnesses grew, 5 people now, phones glowing in the darkness. An elderly black woman called out, "Why y'all got her like that? She ain't done nothing." "Ma'am, step back or you'll be arrested for interfering with a police investigation," Ward snapped. Cole returned again, his voice uncertain. "No warrants. Records clean. Not even a parking ticket." Silence. Amara could almost hear Ward's mind working, his prejudiced assumptions crashing against contradictory facts. She had a clean record. The car wasn't stolen. Her registration was legitimate. So he did what officers like him always did when reality refused to conform to their prejudices. He escalated. "I smell marijuana," Ward announced suddenly. "I'm conducting a search based on probable cause." "There's no marijuana in my car," Amara said, her voice rising despite her efforts to remain calm. "Officer, you're violating my Fourth Amendment rights. I know you're violating them because I've been a cop for 23 years. There you go again with that cop story." Ward spun her around roughly. "Let me tell you something. I've been doing this job for 14 years. I've seen every scam, every con, every lie that people like you try to pull. You bought some fake credentials online, maybe paid someone to make you a prop badge? Thought you could flash it during traffic stops and get out of tickets? My credentials are real, Amara's voice cracked. Call District 7. That's where I've been serving. Call the superintendent's office. We'll call whoever we need to call, Ward interrupted. Right after we search your vehicle for the marijuana I smell, and right after we take you in for impersonating a police officer. That's multiple felonies, sweetheart. You're looking at real prison time. Sweetheart. The diminutive term, delivered with poisonous condescension. Sergeant Dennis Morrison's patrol car arrived, summoned by Cole. Morrison was old guard, 52 years old, 30 years on the force, the kind of supervisor who'd learned policing in an era when brutality was accepted policy. He emerged from his vehicle with the weathered authority of someone who'd seen it all. What have we got? Morrison asked Ward, not even glancing at Amara. Female claiming to be a police captain, Ward reported. Driving a car registered in her name, but something's off. She's nervous, argumentative, keeps insisting we verify her story. Classic signs of deception. I smell marijuana. Requesting permission to conduct a full vehicle search. There's no marijuana, Amara shouted, her composure finally cracking. My name is Captain Amara Washington. I have 23 years of service. I'm taking command of District 18 on Monday. My credentials are in my purse. Just look at them. Call the superintendent. Call internal affairs. Call anyone. Morrison finally looked at her, and the dismissal in his eyes was absolute. Ma'am, you need to calm down. Your aggressive behavior is making officers fear for their safety. If you continue to escalate, you will be placed under arrest. I'm not being aggressive. I'm asserting my rights as a citizen and identifying myself as a fellow officer. Fellow officer. Morrison laughed, the sound cruel and mocking. Lady, I know every captain in this city. I've worked with them, trained with them, attended their promotion ceremonies, and I've never seen you. So either you're new, which would mean you're a diversity hire pushed through without proper vetting, or you're lying. I'm betting on lying. Diversity hire. The phrase detonated in Amara's brain. She'd graduated top of her class at the academy. She'd spent 5 years in narcotics working undercover. She'd solved a quadruple homicide. She'd served in internal affairs, rooting out corruption. She'd earned her master's degree while working full-time and raising her nephew after her brother died. She'd received the Medal of Valor for talking down an armed suspect and saving 3 hostages. And this man had just reduced her entire career to 2 words: diversity hire. Check her credentials, Morrison told Ward. They're fake. Book her for impersonation. They're real, but she's got warrants or something hinky. Book her anyway. Either way, she's going in. Ward pulled Amara's purse from the passenger seat, dumping its contents onto her car hood with deliberate carelessness. Lipstick rolled onto the pavement. Her wallet fell open, photos of her nieces scattering. Her police credentials, a leather badge holder containing her captain's shield and department ID, landed face up under the streetlight. Ward picked it up, examined it, his brow furrowing. The badge was real, unmistakably real, with the weight and detail that couldn't be faked. The ID showed Amara in uniform, captain's bars visible on her collar. Her badge number, 4738. Her assignment? Special Operations, transitioning to District 18 Commander. It's... Ward faltered. This looks real. Of course it looks real, Morrison said impatiently. They make excellent fakes these days. You can buy anything online. There's no way this woman is a captain. He stared at Amara with naked hostility. Where'd you buy this? How much did you pay? You're just digging yourself deeper, lady. Real cops don't appreciate civilians impersonating us. I am a real cop, Amara screamed, her careful control evaporating. My name is Captain Amara J. Washington, badge number 4738. I've been serving this city since I was 18 years old. I have a master's degree from Northwestern. I've worked narcotics, homicide, and internal affairs. I've been awarded the Medal of Valor. I'm scheduled to take command of District 18 on Monday, September 25th. Just call someone. Ward's hand clamped around her wrist, twisting her arm behind her back with brutal efficiency. The pain was immediate and shocking. That's it, Ward growled. You're under arrest for resisting a lawful order, disorderly conduct, and impersonating a police officer. I'm not impersonating. Amara's words cut off in a gasp of pain as Ward wrenched her arm higher, tendons screaming. Stop resisting, Ward commanded, loud enough for the witnesses to hear, creating an audio record that would justify whatever came next. I'm not resisting. But she knew the script. The officer claims resistance. The civilian denies it. The officer's word carries more weight, except she was one of their own. And they couldn't see it. Wouldn't see it. Cole moved in from the other side, grabbing Amara's free arm. Together, the two men spun her around with coordinated violence, and in one brutal motion perfected through years of unchecked authority, Ward slammed her face, first against the hood of her car. The impact exploded through her skull like a flashbang grenade. Stars burst behind her eyes. Her cheekbone connected with metal, and she felt something split, her lip tearing open against her teeth. Blood immediately filled her mouth, copper-tasting and warm, spilling from her split lip onto the silver paint of her Honda, creating dark rivulets that caught the streetlight. The crowd gasped. Someone screamed. Phones lifted higher, recording every second. Before Amara could recover, before she could process the pain radiating through her face, Cole drove his knee into the small of her back with the full weight of his body behind it. The air expelled from her lungs in an agonized wheeze that sounded like surrender. Her ribs compressed against the car hood. She couldn't breathe, literally couldn't pull air into her collapsed lungs. They wrenched her arms behind her back, Ward and Cole working with practiced synchronization. Her shoulders screamed as they twisted her arms beyond comfortable range of motion, hyperextending joints until she thought something would tear. The handcuffs came out, cold metal that clicked shut around her wrists with pressure calibrated to restrain, not comfort. They tightened the cuffs deliberately, notching them one click past necessary, then another. Metal bit into her wrists, cutting off circulation, leaving marks that would last for days. Her Northwestern sweatshirt had ridden up during the assault. Her credentials lay scattered on the hood next to her bleeding face, the captain's shield catching light like an accusation. Please, Amara gasped, tasting blood. Please. I'm a captain. District 18. Monday? Sure you are, Morrison said, and I'm the mayor. You know what I think? I think you stole those credentials from a real officer. Maybe mugged her, took her badge. That makes this even worse. Assault on a police officer, theft of government property, impersonating. You're going away for years. Officer Kyle Matthews arrived as backup, approaching with his hand on his weapon. He was 26, enthusiastic, the kind of young officer who learned by watching veterans like Ward. What have we got? Matthews asked eagerly. Suspect claiming to be a police captain, Cole explained. Got fake credentials, driving a nice car probably stolen or bought with drug money. She's going in for impersonation, resisting disorderly conduct. Matthews circled Amara. A captain? Man, these people are getting bold. What's next? Someone claiming to be the superintendent? He laughed. Did you check for warrants? These types usually have records as long as my arm. These people, these types, the dehumanizing language stacked like kindling. Clean record, Cole admitted. But the night's young. I'm betting when we process her, something's gonna pop. My credentials are real, Amara shouted, her voice breaking. Blood from her split lip dripped onto her sweatshirt, staining Northwestern's purple logo dark and wet. I'm Captain Amara Washington. I've served this city for 23 years. I've put criminals in prison. I've saved lives. I've testified in federal court. I have a Medal of Valor. Just call someone who can verify. Call District 7. Call Special Operations. Call the Academy. Morrison stepped close, his face inches from hers. You want to know what I think? I think you're a criminal who bought some fake credentials online. I think you've been using them to get out of traffic stops, maybe to scam people, maybe to gain access to places you don't belong. I think you're exactly the kind of person who gives real cops a bad name. And I think when we process you downtown, we're going to find a record of fraud, theft, maybe prostitution. How dare you? Amara hissed. How dare you stand there and accuse me? I've dedicated my life to this department. I've worked cases that would make you vomit. I've gone undercover with gangs that would have killed me if they'd known I was a cop. I've sat with families and told them their loved ones were dead. I've testified against dirty cops who tried to destroy my career because I wouldn't cover for them. And you look at me, at my skin, and you decide I'm a criminal. You decide I'm a prostitute. You decide I'm lying, not based on evidence, based on nothing but your racist assumptions about who deserves to wear this badge. Her voice echoed off the apartment buildings, carrying to every witness, every recording phone. Morrison's face flushed red. That's it. You're done. Ward, Cole, get her in the car. She's going downtown, and I'm personally going to make sure she gets charged with everything we can think of. I didn't touch anyone. You assaulted me. That's not what my report will say, Morrison replied coldly. My report will say you became violent, that you struck Officer Ward, that we had to use necessary force to subdue you. And who do you think they'll believe? 3 decorated officers with years of service? Or some woman with fake credentials screaming about racism? The elderly woman on the sidewalk found her voice. I'm recording this. We all recording this. Y'all wrong, and you know it. Ma'am, final warning, Morrison said. Disperse or be arrested. They dragged Amara toward Ward's patrol car. The handcuffs cut deeper with every step, her wrists going numb. Blood continued to drip from her split lip, leaving dark spots on the sidewalk. Ward opened the rear door with one hand, maintaining his painful grip on Amara's arm with the other. The back seat reeked of stale sweat and desperation, the smell of thousands who'd sat in this cage before her. Watch your head, Ward said with mock courtesy, then deliberately shoved her down without giving her time to duck. Her forehead cracked against the doorframe, not hard enough to knock her unconscious, but hard enough to leave a bruise, hard enough to send another wave of pain crashing through her skull. Amara collapsed onto the hard plastic seat, unable to catch herself with her hands cuffed. She landed awkwardly on her shoulder, crying out as fresh pain radiated down her arm. The door slammed shut with a heavy finality. Through the window, she watched Morrison gather the officers for a huddle. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she understood. They were coordinating their stories, making sure their reports aligned, constructing a narrative that would justify the violence, that would transform her from victim to suspect. The elderly woman approached the car, pressing her face close to the window. You a captain? She asked Amara. Amara nodded, tears finally breaking free and streaming down her face, mixing with blood. I believe you, baby, the woman said. I seen what they did. I got it on my phone. You ain't alone. Thank you, Amara whispered, but she felt utterly alone. The drive to the station took 12 minutes. 12 minutes of sitting in handcuffs that cut circulation, her wrists swelling. 12 minutes of tasting blood. 12 minutes of throbbing pain. 12 minutes of listening to Ward and Cole joke about their evening plans as if they hadn't just brutalized an innocent woman. District 18's station house rose from the urban landscape like a fortress. This building would be her command in 5 days. These officers would be under her authority. She'd planned to walk through these doors as a leader, ready to reform a broken culture. Instead, she was dragged through the back entrance in handcuffs, bleeding and humiliated. Lieutenant Patricia Thornton sat behind the processing desk, her iron-gray hair and rigid posture suggesting decades of enforcing order through paperwork. She looked up as Ward and Cole brought Amara in, and her expression immediately hardened. What do we have? Thornton asked. Suspect stopped for traffic violation, Ward began. Became argumentative and aggressive. Claimed to be a police captain, had fake credentials, resisted arrest, struck Officer Ward during the altercation. had to be subdued with appropriate force. Amara found her voice. "That's a complete lie. I never struck anyone. They assaulted me. I identified myself as Captain Amara Washington." "Be quiet," Thornton ordered. "You'll have a chance to speak during processing." "I'm speaking now!" Amara's voice cracked. "I'm a captain. I'm taking command of this district on Monday. My credentials are real. Call Superintendent Bennett. Call him right now." "We don't call the superintendent at 9 p.m. because someone claims to know him," Thornton said coldly. She turned to Ward. "The credentials?" Ward produced Amara's badge holder. Thornton examined it under her desk lamp, checking the weight, the seal, the holographic security features. "It looks authentic," Thornton admitted slowly. "They make excellent fakes," Ward replied. "Check her in the system. I guarantee this badge number doesn't match her name." Thornton's fingers flew across her keyboard. Seconds ticked by like hours. Amara's heart hammered. This was it, the moment when the truth would emerge, when this nightmare would end. Thornton's face went pale. She stared at her screen, then at Amara, then back at her screen. "What?" Ward asked. "What does it say?" "Badge number 4738 is registered to—" Thornton's voice faltered. "Captain Amara J. Washington, 23 years of service, currently assigned to Special Operations, transfer pending to—" She stopped reading, her eyes widening with horror. "Oh my God!" "What?" Cole demanded. "Transfer pending to where?" Thornton looked up at the officers. "Transfer pending to District 18 as commanding officer, effective Monday, September 25th. Silence crashed through the processing room like a physical force. Ward's face drained of color. Cole took an involuntary step backward. Morrison, who'd just entered, froze mid-step. If this moment of justice touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe, because this journey is just getting started, and what happens next will show you that actions have consequences. Amara straightened, despite the handcuffs, despite her pain, despite the blood still drying on her sweatshirt. "Now, would someone please take these handcuffs off?" she said quietly. "And someone should probably call the superintendent. Because in 5 days, I walk through your front door as your captain, and every single one of you just gave me very compelling evidence that this district needs exactly the kind of reform I was sent here to implement." 3 years earlier, Amara Washington had been on top of the world in a different way. She'd just made detective in the narcotics unit, one of the youngest officers ever promoted to that position. She was engaged to Marcus, a civil rights attorney who shared her passion for justice. Her younger brother Terrence was finishing his master's degree in social work. Life felt full of promise. Then came the raid that changed everything. It was supposed to be routine, a drug house in Englewood, solid intel, proper warrants. But the intelligence was wrong. The house didn't belong to drug dealers. It belonged to the Henderson family, Gerald, a construction worker, his wife Patricia, a nurse, and their 3 children, including 8-year-old Malik, who was autistic and terrified of loud noises. Amara had been first through the door. She'd seen Malik's face, seen his terror as armed officers stormed his home at midnight, seen him scramble under his bed trying to hide from the nightmare unfolding around him. The other officers were screaming, weapons drawn, treating the family like criminals because someone in the chain of command had gotten an address wrong. Amara had frozen. Not from fear, from recognition of injustice so profound it stopped her heart. These were innocent people. This was their home. And the police, her police, were terrorizing them. She'd lowered her weapon, tried to calm the situation, protected Malik when another officer tried to drag him from under the bed. And when it was over, when the mistake was obvious, when the Henderson family sat traumatized in their living room while officers tried to pretend this violation was just procedure, Amara had done something that marked her as different from her colleagues. She'd apologized. On her knees, in front of that terrified child, she'd said, "I'm sorry. We made a terrible mistake. This should never have happened to you." The other officers had been furious. You don't apologize. It admits liability, opens the door to lawsuits, undermines police authority. But Amara didn't care about any of that. She cared that an 8-year-old boy would have nightmares about police for years because they'd gotten an address wrong. She'd testified for the Henderson family when they sued the department. She'd documented every procedural failure, every supervisor who'd signed off on bad intel, every corner that had been cut. The department settled for $2 million, and Amara's career trajectory changed overnight. Some saw her as a hero, an officer willing to hold the system accountable. Others saw her as a traitor who'd chosen civilians over the blue line. Death threats appeared in her locker. Anonymous calls warned her to watch her back. Marcus's car was vandalized 3 times in 2 months. The stress destroyed her engagement. Marcus loved her, but he couldn't live with the constant threat. The knowledge that speaking truth could get them both killed. They'd separated amicably, and he'd moved to Atlanta to work for the ACLU. Her brother Terrence had been her rock through it all, until a traffic stop in Mississippi during a road trip went wrong. The details were disputed. The officer claimed Terrence had been aggressive. Witnesses said Terrence had been cooperative, polite, terrified. Either way, he'd ended up in the hospital with 3 broken ribs and a fractured orbital bone. He'd died 2 days later from complications. The officer was cleared, deemed justified. No charges filed. Amara had buried her brother on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, she'd applied for a transfer to Internal Affairs. If they were going to destroy her career for holding police accountable, she'd decided, she might as well make it official. She'd spent 4 years in IA, investigating misconduct, documenting abuse, building cases that got dirty cops fired. She'd made enemies. She'd also made a difference. Her personnel file was a contradiction. Stellar performance reviews paired with disciplinary notes for failure to demonstrate proper loyalty to fellow officers. Commendations for solving major cases alongside complaints from union representatives about her overzealous pursuit of internal investigations. The superintendent, Harold Bennett, had noticed. He was one of the few high-ranking officials trying to reform the department from within, fighting an uphill battle against decades of entrenched culture. He'd pulled Amara into his office 6 months ago. "I'm giving you District 18, he'd said without preamble. "It's a mess. Excessive force complaints through the roof, community relations destroyed, old guard running it like their personal fiefdom. I need someone who isn't afraid to break things, someone who puts justice above popularity. I think that's you." Amara had accepted, knowing she was walking into a war zone. Now, standing in the District 18 processing room with her wrists still marked by handcuffs, her lips still bleeding, she understood that the war had begun before she'd even officially reported for duty. The handcuffs came off with trembling hands. Ward fumbled with the key twice before managing to unlock them, his fingers shaking so badly the metal jangled. The moment her wrists were free, Amara brought her hands forward, examining the deep red grooves carved into her brown skin, the swelling already beginning. Nobody spoke. The processing room had transformed into a tableau of horror. 5 officers frozen in the realization of what they'd done, and 1 battered woman standing in the center of their collective nightmare. Lieutenant Thornton found her voice first. "Captain Washington, we didn't know. If we had known—" "If you had known, you would have treated me with basic human dignity," Amara interrupted. "If you had known I outranked you, suddenly the violence would have been unacceptable." Thornton's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. "I told you who I was," Amara continued. "I identified myself repeatedly. I showed you my credentials. I gave you my badge number. I begged you to verify my identity, and instead of taking 30 seconds to check your database, you decided I was lying. You decided my credentials were fake. You decided I was a criminal. Why? What about me made you so certain I couldn't possibly be who I claimed to be?" The question hung in the air, unanswered because they all knew the answer. Morrison stepped forward, his face attempting contrition but looking more like panic. "Captain, this was a terrible misunderstanding." "An error?" Amara's laugh was bitter. "Sergeant Morrison, you called me a diversity hire. You suggested I was a prostitute. You coordinated with your officers to falsify reports. That's not an error. That's a pattern of behavior so deeply ingrained you didn't even question it." Ward's voice emerged hoarse. "Captain, please. I have 14 years on this force. I have a family. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I can't lose my job." Amara turned to face him. "You have a family. Tell me, Officer Ward, when you slammed my face into that car hood, when you split my lip open and made me bleed, did you think about whether I had a family? Did you consider that I might have nieces who love me? A mother waiting for me to come home? When you tightened those handcuffs until my wrists went numb, did you wonder if I had people who would mourn if you killed me? I wasn't going to—" "You don't know that. You escalated a traffic stop into violence so quickly you didn't even check if there was a reason. My taillight wasn't broken. You manufactured probable cause. You decided I was guilty before you had evidence. So tell me, what would you have done if I hadn't been a captain? If I'd just been Amara Washington, civilian? Would you have beaten me worse? Planted evidence? How many times have you done this before?" Silence. Ward's face had gone gray. Amara pulled out her phone and made a call. It was answered on the second ring. "Superintendent Bennett, this is Captain Washington. I'm at District 18. I need you to hear what happened tonight." She explained everything while the officers stood frozen. The illegal stop, the manufactured probable cause, the refusal to verify her credentials, the racial language, the violence, the coordinated attempt to falsify reports. Bennett's voice came through the speaker, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Are you injured?" "Split lip, bruised face, cuts on my wrists. Nothing requiring hospitalization, but I'm documenting everything." "Good. Stay there. I'm sending Internal Affairs immediately. Nobody leaves that station until IA arrives. Captain Washington, I'm sorry this happened. This is exactly why I chose you for District 18. Amara ended the call and looked at the officers. "You're all on administrative leave effective immediately. You'll surrender your weapons and badges to Lieutenant Thornton. You'll go home and wait for IA to contact you. You will not coordinate your stories. You will not delete anything from your phones or computers. Any attempt to do so will be considered obstruction of justice. Do you understand?" "Yes, Captain," they mumbled in unison. "Now get out of my sight." By Monday morning, the video had gone viral. Marcus Chen's recording, 8 minutes of Amara being brutalized while identifying herself as a captain, had been viewed 17 million times. The hashtag #ShakaCaptainWashington was trending nationally. News crews surrounded District 18, cameras ready to capture her arrival. Amara stood in front of her bathroom mirror, examining her reflection. The split lip had scabbed over but was still swollen. A bruise the color of midnight spread across her left cheekbone. The marks on her wrists had darkened to purple-black bands. She put on her uniform carefully. The crisp navy fabric, the captain's bars on her collar, the badge, shield number 4738, polished until it gleamed. She braided her hair in a tight, professional style. She looked ready. The drive to District 18 felt surreal. Protesters lined the streets. News helicopters circled overhead. She parked in the commander's spot, the one with her name freshly stenciled on the concrete. Stepped out of her car into a storm of camera flashes and shouted questions. "Captain Washington, how do you feel? Will you press charges? Do you think this was racially motivated?" Amara stopped at the station entrance and turned to face the cameras. "My name is Captain Amara J. Washington. I am a 23-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department. On Thursday night, I was stopped by officers from this district. I was profiled, assaulted, and arrested despite repeatedly identifying myself as a police captain. I was brutalized not because I broke the law, but because officers looked at my skin and decided I was a criminal. She paused. But I'm not here to talk about what happened to me. I'm here to talk about what happens to everyone else. Because I'm alive. I'm standing here with my badge. I have the power to hold those officers accountable. But how many people who look like me don't have that power? How many victims don't have badges to prove their humanity? How many families have buried loved ones because officers decided guilt based on skin color? The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. I'm taking command of District 18 today as planned, and my first act as commander will be to launch a comprehensive review of every excessive force complaint filed in the last decade. Every dismissed case will be reopened. Every victim will be heard. Every officer with a pattern of abuse will be held accountable. This ends today. She walked into the station house, leaving the roar of approval and outrage behind her. Inside, officers lined the hallways, standing at attention. Some looked ashamed. Others looked angry. A few looked scared. She walked to the commander's office and found her command staff waiting. They stood when she entered. "Sit," Amara commanded. She remained standing. "This district is under federal investigation as of this morning. The FBI's Civil Rights Division is reviewing every case, every complaint, every incident report from the last 10 years. If you have something to hide, now is the time to come forward voluntarily." Lieutenant Raymond Cooper spoke up. "Captain, with respect, morale in this district is already low. If you come in treating every officer like a criminal—" "Officer Ward treated me like a criminal," Amara interrupted. "Sergeant Morrison treated me like a criminal. They did so based solely on my appearance. So yes, I'm going to treat officers who abuse their authority like the criminals they are. If that's bad for morale, I suggest officers try following the law. Starting today, every use of force will be reviewed by me personally. Body cameras will be mandatory and functional. Technical failures will be grounds for disciplinary action. Any officer who uses racial language, engages in profiling, or violates constitutional rights will be fired and prosecuted. Are we clear?" "Yes, Captain." Within 2 weeks, the FBI investigation had uncovered a pattern of abuse spanning nearly a decade. Officer Ward alone had been involved in 43 use-of-force incidents. 12 civilians had filed complaints against him. All 12 had been dismissed as unfounded. Sergeant Morrison had trained 17 officers currently serving in District 18. 14 of them had excessive force complaints. The pattern was undeniable. Morrison had been teaching a generation of officers that brutality was acceptable. The evidence was overwhelming. Federal prosecutors convened a grand jury. Subscribe for more stories of racial justice, hit that like button if accountability matters to you, and drop a comment. Have you ever witnessed police brutality being punished? The trial began on a cold November morning in federal court. The courtroom was packed, victims' families, civil rights activists, off-duty officers, and hundreds of citizens who'd waited their entire lives to see police held accountable. Judge Margaret Blackstone presided, her expression suggesting she'd seen too many cases like this. The prosecution opened with the video. 8 minutes of Amara Washington being brutalized while repeatedly identifying herself as a captain. The courtroom watched in silence as Ward slammed her against the car, as Cole drove his knee into her back, as Morrison suggested she was a prostitute. Several jurors wiped tears from their eyes. Federal Prosecutor Victoria Hayes stood. "You just watched police officers assault their incoming commander. You watched them ignore evidence. You watched them manufacture charges, and Captain Washington survived because she had a badge. But the evidence will show that Officers Ward, Cole, Morrison, Matthews, and Lieutenant Thornton have done this before. To people who didn't have badges, who didn't have power, who didn't have voices." She presented case after case. Jamal Rodriguez, beaten during a traffic stop in 2019, complaint dismissed. Tanisha Brown, thrown to the ground while 8 months pregnant, complaint lost. Marcus Ellis, tased 7 times during a mental health crisis, lawsuit settled quietly. Deshaun Parker, 14 years old, handcuffed and left in a holding cell for 18 hours. The pattern was clear. The victims were predominantly black. The complaints were consistently dismissed. The officers faced no consequences. Hayes showed the jury Ward's personnel file. 43 use-of-force incidents. The average officer goes their entire career with maybe 2 or 3. But Derek Ward? 43 times he felt threatened. Why? Because the victims were black. Because the culture in District 18 treated black citizens as threats by default. The defense tried to argue that Ward legitimately feared for his safety, that Amara's refusal to immediately exit her vehicle constituted resistance. But Hayes demolished that argument. Captain Washington is 5'6" and weighs 140 pounds. Officer Ward is 6'2" and weighs 215 pounds. He's a trained officer with a weapon and backup. She was unarmed, alone, and compliant. The only thing threatening about Captain Washington was that she was black. Witness after witness took the stand. Marcus Chen described watching officers brutalize a woman who kept saying, "I'm a captain." Elena Rodriguez testified about officers ignoring her questions. Officer Jamal Thompson described the code of silence that prevented good cops from stopping bad ones. Then Amara took the stand. She described the stop, the escalation, the violence. She showed the jury photos of her injuries. She explained how it felt to beg officers to verify her identity and be mocked instead. "I'm a captain. I've dedicated my life to law enforcement. I believe in the badge. But that night, I learned what thousands of black Americans already knew. The badge doesn't protect you if officers decide you're guilty before they see it." The defense attorney tried to shake her. "Isn't it true you refused to exit your vehicle immediately?" "I exited as soon as I was ordered to." "But you questioned the stop." "I asked why I'd been pulled over. That's not illegal. That's a citizen's right." "You raised your voice." "After I'd been assaulted and handcuffed, yes. Wouldn't you?" No response. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty. On all counts. Ward. Guilty. Cole. Guilty. Morrison. Guilty. Matthews. Guilty. Thornton. Guilty. The courtroom erupted. Victims' families sobbed with relief. The convicted officers sat in stunned silence. Judge Blackstone gavelled for order. "I've been on this bench for 23 years, but District 18 represents something particularly insidious, a culture where brutality became routine, where supervisors enabled abuse, where victims were systematically silenced." She turned to the defendants. "Officer Ward, you are sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Officer Cole, 6 years. Officer Matthews, 5 years. Sergeant Morrison, 10 years. Your role as a supervisor makes your crime more severe. Lieutenant Thornton, 7 years. The sentences landed like hammer blows. You will also forfeit your pensions. You will never work in law enforcement again. You wore badges. You took oaths to protect and serve. Instead, you brutalized the very people you swore to protect. You are a disgrace to justice itself." Bloco 3, Acts 8:10, Maximo 2500 palavras. 5 years after the verdict, Amara Washington stood in the newly renovated District 18 community room facing an audience of 200 people. The space had been transformed from a dusty storage area into a welcoming center where citizens could meet with officers, file complaints without fear, and access resources. The walls displayed photographs documenting the district's transformation. Before and after images showed the cultural shift. Officers in old photos standing with crossed arms and hostile expressions, replaced by current photos of community policing events, youth mentorship programs, and officers who actually smiled when interacting with residents. "When I walked into this building 5 years ago with a split lip and bruises," Amara began, her voice carrying across the silent room, "I made a promise. I promised that the culture of abuse and impunity would end. I promised that victims would be heard. I promised accountability." She gestured to the crowd, which included several people she recognized from that night. Marcus Chen, Elena Rodriguez, the elderly woman who'd filmed and believed her when no one else would. We've made progress. Use of force incidents in District 18 have dropped by 73%. Complaints of racial profiling have decreased by 68%. Community trust, measured by anonymous surveys, has increased from 18% to 62%. These aren't just numbers. They represent real change, real healing, real justice. The audience applauded, but Amara raised her hand for silence. But we're not done. Progress doesn't mean perfection. Last month, an officer in District 12 used excessive force during an arrest. The body camera footage was clear, undeniable, and that officer was fired within 48 hours, criminally charged within a week. That's the standard now. That's what accountability looks like. And it only happened because we refused to accept the old way of doing things. She paused, making eye contact with officers in the audience. Her officers, men and women who'd embraced the reforms, who'd proven that good policing and accountability weren't mutually exclusive. I want to introduce you to someone, Amara continued. A young black woman stood from the front row, her hands trembling slightly. This is Destiny Parker. 5 years ago, her brother Deshaun was 14 years old when he was arrested by officers from this district. He was handcuffed and left in a holding cell for 18 hours without food, water, or contact with his family. His complaint was dismissed as unfounded. He was told he was lying, that officers don't make mistakes like that. Destiny's voice was soft but steady as she spoke. My brother stopped trusting police after that. He stopped trusting the system. When Captain Washington reopened his case, when she personally apologized to our family, when the officers involved were disciplined, it didn't erase what happened. But it showed us that someone cared, that justice was possible. Deshaun is in college now, studying criminal justice. He wants to be the kind of cop Captain Washington is. The applause was thunderous this time. Amara felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them back. That's what this is about, she said. Not revenge, not punishment for its own sake, but accountability that leads to healing. Justice that rebuilds trust. A system that protects everyone, not just some people. After the event, Amara returned to her office. The commander's desk, her desk, was covered with paperwork, incident reports, community feedback forms. The work never stopped. Reform wasn't a destination. It was a continuous journey. Her phone buzzed, a text from her sister. Saw the community event on the news. Mom's crying. She's so proud of you. We all are. Amara smiled, touching the small framed photo on her desk. Her brother Terrence, taken 2 months before he died in that traffic stop in Mississippi. His death had almost broken her, but she'd chosen to transform that pain into purpose, that grief into action. I hope you can see this, T, she whispered to the photo. I hope you know I'm still fighting. A knock on her door interrupted her reflection. Officer Jamal Thompson entered, the same officer who'd tried to intervene that night 5 years ago, who'd recognized Amara and attempted to stop the brutality. He'd been punished for breaking ranks, demoted, ostracized by fellow officers who valued loyalty over justice. But under Amara's command, Thompson had thrived. She'd promoted him to sergeant, made him head of the newly created Community Relations Unit, empowered him to train other officers in de-escalation and cultural competency. Captain, we have a situation, Thompson said, his expression serious. Officer Bradley just made a traffic stop in Sector 4. The driver is black, claims the stop was pretextual. She's filming, saying she's a lawyer and knows her rights. Bradley called for backup. I thought you'd want to know. Amara was on her feet immediately. Let's go. They arrived at the scene within minutes. A black woman in professional attire stood beside a Mercedes, her phone held high, recording as Officer Bradley, a 32-year-old white officer who'd transferred to District 18 2 years ago, explained why he'd pulled her over. Ma'am, your left brake light is out, Bradley was saying, his tone respectful but firm. I can see you're upset, and I understand, but this is a legitimate safety violation. I'm going to give you a warning, not a citation. I just need to see your license and registration. The woman's voice was tight with fear disguised as anger. "I just had my car serviced yesterday. There's nothing wrong with my brake lights. You pulled me over because you saw a black woman in an expensive car and made assumptions." Amara approached slowly, her hands visible. "Excuse me, I'm Captain Washington, commander of this district. May I speak with you?" The woman's eyes widened, recognizing Amara from the viral video years ago. You're the captain they assaulted." "I am. And I want you to know that I take complaints seriously. If you believe this stop was unjustified, I will personally review the dashcam footage." "Officer Bradley, is your body camera on?" "Yes, Captain. Has been since I initiated the stop." "Good." Amara turned back to the woman. "What's your name?" Nicole Henderson." The name hit Amara like a physical blow. Henderson. The same family from that raid 3 years before she made captain. The family whose traumatized son had changed her trajectory, whose lawsuit had marked her as different from other cops. "Are you related to Gerald Henderson?" Amara asked quietly. Nicole's eyes filled with tears. "He was my uncle. He died 2 years ago. Heart attack. My Aunt Patricia says the stress from that raid, from having guns pointed at her babies, it never left him. It killed him slowly." Amara felt the weight of that tragedy settle on her shoulders. "I'm so sorry. I was there that night. I tried to stop it. I testified for your family." "I know. My aunt told me about you. She said you were the only officer who apologized, who admitted it was wrong. That meant everything to her." Amara walked to Nicole's car, examining the brake lights. She asked Nicole to step on the brake. The left light flickered, barely noticeable in daylight, but technically malfunctioning. "Officer Bradley was correct," Amara said. "Your brake light has an intermittent failure. However, I understand why you were frightened. Given your family's history with police, I understand why any traffic stop would feel threatening." She turned to Bradley. "Officer, I'm going to have you give Ms. Henderson a warning and a recommendation to get her brake light checked. I'm also going to note in my report that you handled this stop professionally and respectfully. Ms. Henderson, I'm going to give you my direct number. If you ever feel you've been treated unfairly by any officer in this city, you call me immediately. Can we agree that's fair?" Nicole nodded, wiping her eyes. "Yes. Thank you, Captain. I'm sorry I assumed—" "Don't apologize for protecting yourself," Amara interrupted gently. "Your fear is valid. Your trauma is real. What happened to your family should never have happened. All I can do is promise that I'm working every day to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." As they drove back to the station, Thompson spoke. "You handled that perfectly, Captain. 5 years ago, that situation would have escalated into another brutality case. Bradley would have gotten angry at being questioned, backup would have swarmed, and Nicole Henderson would have been arrested for disorderly conduct." "That's why the work matters," Amara replied. "That's why we can't stop, can't get comfortable, can't assume we've fixed everything. Every traffic stop is an opportunity to build trust or destroy it. Every interaction matters." Back at her desk that evening, Amara composed her monthly report to Superintendent Bennett. The statistics were encouraging. Complaints down, community engagement up, use of force incidents at historic lows. But she also documented challenges: officers who resisted reforms, citizens who still distrusted police, the long road ahead toward genuine reconciliation. Her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Captain Washington?" The voice was male, older, hesitant. This is Derek Ward." Amara's hand tightened on the phone. Ward, the officer who'd slammed her face into her car, who'd brutalized her, who'd spent the last 5 years in federal prison. "I know I'm not supposed to contact you," Ward continued quickly. "It's probably a violation of my restraining order, but I'm getting out next month, early release for good behavior, and I needed to say something before I lose my courage." Amara said nothing, letting him fill the silence. "I was wrong," Ward said, his voice cracking. I was so goddamn wrong about everything. I spent 5 years in prison thinking about that night, about what I did to you, about all the people I hurt before you. I told myself for so long that I was just doing my job, that the people I brutalized were criminals who deserved it. But they weren't. Most of them were innocent. And even the ones who weren't, even actual criminals, deserve to be treated like human beings. He paused, breathing heavily. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking you to lift the restraining order or help me find work or anything like that. I needed you to know that you were right. About everything. About the racism, about the culture, about how we treated people. You were right, and I was wrong, and I'm sorry. That's all. The line went dead. Amara sat in silence, processing. She didn't know if Ward's apology was genuine or self-serving. She didn't know if his transformation was real or performed. What she knew was that accountability had consequences. For Ward, for the system, for everyone. She thought about Nicole Henderson, carrying her family's trauma. About Destiny Parker's brother, rebuilding his trust in justice. About the hundreds of victims whose cases she'd reopened, whose voices she'd finally amplified. This was the legacy she was building. Not perfect, not complete, but real. 10 years after that September night, Amara Washington stood at a podium in City Hall, accepting the Chicago Police Department's highest honor, the Superintendent's Lifetime Achievement Award. The room was filled with officers, city officials, community leaders, and citizens whose lives she'd touched. Superintendent Bennett, now retired but present for the occasion, spoke first. When I assigned Captain Washington to District 18, I knew I was sending her into a war zone. What I didn't know was that she'd face that battle on her very first night, that she'd be brutalized by the officers she was sent to lead. What happened to her was a travesty. But what she did afterward, the reforms she implemented, the culture she transformed, the trust she rebuilt, that's nothing short of miraculous. Amara approached the podium to thunderous applause. She looked out at the audience, seeing faces from every chapter of her journey. Officers she'd disciplined who'd become better cops. Victims she'd vindicated who'd found healing. Community members who'd learned to trust police again. I almost didn't become a cop, she began. After my brother Terrence died in police custody, after I saw how the system protected his killers, I questioned everything. But I decided that the answer to bad policing isn't no policing. It's better policing. It's accountability. It's officers who see every citizen as human, who understand that the badge is a responsibility, not a license for violence. She held up the award, the crystal catching the light. This doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to every victim who had the courage to come forward, to every witness who filmed when it was dangerous to do so, to every officer who chose integrity over loyalty, to every citizen who demanded better and refused to accept that's just how it is. Her voice grew stronger. What happened to me 10 years ago was not unique. It was routine. It happened to thousands of Black Americans every day, in every city, in every state. The only difference was that I had a badge to eventually prove my humanity. But here's what I learned. We shouldn't need badges or credentials or perfect records to be treated with dignity. We should be treated with dignity because we're human. That's the standard, that's the goal, and we still have work to do to reach it. The applause was deafening. What's your view about this story? If you were in Captain Washington's shoes, would you have had the grace to continue serving a system that had brutalized you? Would you have fought to reform it from within or walked away? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you that justice is real, hit that subscribe button for more true stories of racial justice and karma. Smash the like button if you believe police should be held accountable. Share this story with someone who needs to see that discrimination has a price. Where are you watching from? Tell us in the comments. Remember, badges don't make you immune to prejudice, but accountability makes everyone safer. From victim to commander, Captain Washington proved that one person's courage can transform an entire system. Justice delayed is justice denied, but justice delivered, even years later, still matters. Justice sees color, but it also sees courage.